Justin Trudeau, and I now have reverted to calling him Blackface Hitler. Now, I am generally speaking of the rule that you don't compare people to Hitler and you don't compare regimes to Nazi regimes unless they're really, really, really behaving like those people or those regimes in very distinct manners, very clearly analogous manners, even if it's not the same distance, it's the same bloody direction. And that's quite where Canada has been heading for a little bit of time now. So much so, by the way, that Forbes, we've seen the article, was lamenting about how the Canadians' medical assistance in dying, MAIDS, euthanasia program, is echoing Nazi-era policies. Justin Trudeau, you all know this, he's had a scandal-free prime ministership. He's been found to have violated the code of ethics twice. He was accused 3 times, found in violation twice, is alleged to and apologized for having groped a reporter back in 2000, elbowed a female NDP member, New Democrat parliamentarian, in the boobie during a confrontation in Parliament. The man who for the last 8 years has treated Canada like it's the recipient of, everybody from the world who's having problems in whatever country they might be living in because of a foreign policy that's causing problems in that country. Open borders effectively, but not like the illegal way in the States. He did it legally, like foreign students, temporary visas, I think, from what I understand, like willy-nilly. Basically turned Canada into an open border country, despite warnings for the last several years that our healthcare system already sucks caca, and you can't load it with non-tax-paying foreigners who are going to put an additional drain on an already strained healthcare system. So he's been, this is Justin Trudeau. If you're anti-immigrant, you're a xenophobe Nazi piece of garbage. This is this Justin Trudeau, the blackface Hitler who judged other people for being xenophobic, anti-immigrant, misogynistic, transphobic, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, you name it. Put the obic or the ism on it, and Justin Trudeau has accused others of being it. This is what he just had to say the other day.
Far too many corporations have chosen to abuse our temporary measures, exploiting foreign workers while refusing to hire Canadians for a fair wage. All while, under the watch of provinces, some colleges and universities are bringing in more international students than communities can accommodate, treating them as an expendable means to line their own pockets. That's unacceptable, and it needs to change. Businesses should no longer rely on cheap foreign labor. My message to them is that there is no better time to hire and invest in Canadian workers. Our international student cap is dealing with exploitative colleges and universities, but all institutions need to take it upon themselves to be more responsible. And every step of the way, we need provinces and territories to work closely with us, too.
We've talked about the principle of DARVO, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender, and it's the quintessential tactic of a pathological narcissist. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I play one in my hypochondriacal mind. Justin Trudeau's a pathological narcissist, sociopath, whatever you want to call it. Do you see the way that he is framing this as it being the businesses who are in the wrong, the universities are in the wrong, because they were exploiting workers who were allowed into the country under his immigration policies? Let me flesh it out in case you missed it.
Far too many corporations have chosen to abuse our temporary measures, exploiting foreign workers while refusing to hire Canadians for a fair wage.
You brought them in so that corporations could use them as cheap labor. They're abusing of your temporary measures. If they're operating within the framework of the law, Justin Trudeau, you're the one who is to blame for having enacted a policy that these corporations could use in the first place. If it's not illegal, it's because it's abiding by your laws, you pathological narcissist. It's the corporations. Everybody has been saying that this is what's happening. You're importing cheap, unskilled labor, and it's killing the Canadian job market. Oh, but Canadians don't want crappy jobs. Well, they're supposed to be crappy jobs in quotes as training jobs for young people, not career jobs for the rest of your life. Okay, that's part one.
All while, under the watch of provinces, some colleges and universities are bringing in more international students than communities can accommodate, treating them as an expendable means to line their own pockets.
Blaming it on the provinces, blaming it on the universities. By the way, notice he doesn't say bringing in more immigrants than the law allows, bringing in more than communities can accommodate. In other words, Justin Trudeau, you enacted foreign or national policy, immigration policy, that resulted in too many immigrants coming into the country that could be accommodated by the communities. And then the son of a bitch decides to pass it off to corporations and the provinces and the universities. This man is the scum of the earth. And I'm saying that knowing that there's very good scum out there. Like, scum has an actual purpose. It cleanses the detritus from off the forest floor. This man is the detritus. They took in more than the communities can handle. Mother effer, that's what people were telling you was the problem with your immigration policy from day one.
That's unacceptable.
Oh, it's unacceptable.
And it needs to change. Businesses should no longer rely on cheap foreign labor. My message to them is that there is no better time to hire and invest in Canadian workers.
All right, now I'm going to stop
Our
there because
international
at the risk of being consumed by hatred and having it turn me into Mary L. Trump, I pray for Justin's soul. This man has single-handedly, within the last 8, 9, oh my goodness, it's going to be 10 years, destroyed, or at the very least, severely injured Canada. And then he goes and blames the corporations for abusing of the immigration policy that he enacted, blames the universities and the provinces for taking in too many foreign students than the communities can accommodate. Dumbass, that was the problem with your immigration policy from the get-go. And we talked about it. The healthcare system is in such bloody shambles. It's been in shambles for decades. Everybody knows this. It's in such shambles now that they have resorted to literally killing Canadians to alleviate the burden. Now, some people are going to take offense to that. First of all, to the sons of bitches out there who filed ethics complaints because he didn't like my tweets when I said that Justin Trudeau murdered 13,000 Canadians in 1 year under the euthanasia program, suck a lemon. It is not an accident that euthanasia has gone. I think it's doubled every year, but the official stats are like up 30% year over year. Right now, it was that. The last stats, I think, were 14,000 Canadians killed under the euthanasia program. 13,241 in 2022. I could assert with relative confidence that that number is a wild underestimate because they're not counting the people who they just morph up to death. 13,000 people in 2022. It represented 4%, over 4% of all death in Canada. In Quebec, it represented over 6.5% of all death in the province. And CBC running articles, which now read like horror stories in retrospect. It could actually save money for the healthcare system. Kayla Pollock, the young lady who was rendered a quadriplegic after taking the Moderna booster, rendered a quadriplegic, told by the province, we can't really take care of you. You're going to live a miserable life. So have you thought about taking it and we can help you make it painless? So if this doesn't enrage you, I would dare say you either are not a living human or you don't have a soul. This is what's going on in Canada now, and Justin Trudeau finally realized that the immigration policy, which is straining social fabric, straining social infrastructure, not such a good idea. And when we said that they were actually killing people who were not terminally ill, some people scoffed, some people laughed, some people said, oh, you're crazy conspiracy theorist, Viva. It has to go through a rigorous process, and they have to get approved by 2 doctors, not just 1 doctor. And then I give examples of a woman in Ontario who was put to death because she had MCS, multiple chemical sensitivity, and she couldn't get reasonable accommodations to live in because the government sucks crap. Killed. They're offering it to veterans. Oh, that was just a one-off. Ontario man granted euthanasia for controversial, quote, post-COVID-19 vaccination syndrome, end quote. Remember we talked about this. They're going to euthanize the people who have been injured by the jab that they rammed into their veins, untested, without any traditional testing, mass-produced through rush tactics, and now they're going to kill them. I don't. We're going to see, because we don't know what post-COVID-19 vaccination syndrome means. But if it sounds like a vax injury, so they've injured a citizen as a result of their scientifically untenable, morally horrendous decision to compel vaccination, and now they're going to kill them if their life is too miserable after their vaccine injury, and they can't take care of them because, healthcare system's overloaded. The case is among several highlighted by an Ontario MAID death review committee involving people who weren't terminally ill. Remember, I actually had to have arguments with these ignorant, smooth-brain trolls on Twitter. They're not putting to death anybody who's not who's not terminally ill. Yes, they are. Oh, well, who are you to tell them that they can't what they can't do with their own lives? They're terminating people now, and you're going to see who suffer from mental illness. This dude right here, mentally ill. When you euthanize a mentally ill person, you're murdering them. Much in the same way the Nazis started with the mentally ill and the handicapped in their mercy killings, and they even called it mercy killings. I have to fight, and then the goalpost move. All right, well, they're not killing mentally ill people or people who are not terminally ill, but it's good that they are because it's freedom of choice, right? Viva, you're a libertarian. An Ontario man in his 40s with a history of mental illness died by euthanasia. He was murdered by the state after his assisted death assessors decided that the most reasonable explanation for his physical decline was a post-COVID-19, quote, vaccination syndrome. So they just murdered a mentally ill man who was vax injured, by the sounds of it. The term is controversial. Canada's current vaccine reporting system for adverse events doesn't include post-vaccine syndrome, and multiple specialists consulted before his death couldn't agree on a diagnosis, raising questions as to whether the man's condition met the criteria for irremediable. Because remember now, it's not terminal. It just has to be irremediable, meaning hopeless, incurable condition. The anonymous case is one of several highlighted in a series of reports issued by the 16-member MAID review committee struck by Ontario's chief coroner in January. Okay. Identified as Mr. A, suffering from a functional decline following 3 vaccinations of SARS-CoV-2. Holy shit, can they do any more negative publicity for Canada? Oh, and then I have to get calls from reporters. Why aren't you reporting nicely on Canada, Viva? Oh, Ruben and Tim Pool, Russian paid assets were being paid to report negative stories on Canada. I'm like, what do you want them to do? Praise the government for this? 3 jabs. Suffered from depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, personality disorder while navigating his physical symptoms, was twice admitted to the hospital, once involuntarily with thoughts of suicide. Can you imagine? They hospitalized him because he had thoughts of suicide. Then they killed him. My goodness, you got Justin Trudeau sitting up there. Well, this would have just saved us a lot of money if we had just killed him before being hospitalized the 3rd time. Listen to this. I mean, amongst his multiple specialists, no unifying diagnosis was confirmed according to the report. However, his MAID assessors opined that the most reasonable diagnosis for his clinical presentation was a post-vaccine syndrome in keeping with chronic fatigue syndrome. No pathological findings. Canada's law requires people to have grievous and irremediable physical conditions, okay, whatever. Well, that's what's going on in Canada. But you think that the process is all roses. Oh, you just, you go into a little, into one of those booths that they had in Futurama, and it's quick, mercifully painless, and that's it. This is Kelsey Sharon on Jordan Peterson.
But what I found out yesterday that really, really bothered me was the mechanism of the actual procedure. So there's this drug called sodium thiopental. MAID is being seen as compassionate and empathetic in care.
You know, the Nazi euthanasia program started with compassion and care, right?
I'm so glad you said that, because when I got to do trigonometry, we went to the war museums, and what terrified me the most was walking through the World War II portion and seeing the same verbiage.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
So the sodium thiopental, which was really wild about it, is this anesthesiologist was like, it's going missing. We don't have a lot of it. We can't get it anymore all of a sudden over this past couple of years. But Canada and North America, the United States and Canada had been using it for execution in America for death penalty. So they did it's a Freedom of Information Act with the NPR, with a journalist, and they got over 300 autopsies of individuals who were executed in America. And they didn't just get the autopsy kind of overview, they were given in-depth files. 85% of those bodies showed a 2 times level increase of water in the lungs. When this drug is pushed, it causes a drowning, and it's stated as akin to dying by waterboarding or drowning. The reason people in Canada who are given MAID seem peaceful is because they're giving a paralytic first. So they're completely paralyzed, then this drug is administered as one of the 4, and they start drowning. So that means that when it's done by IV, it takes 10 to 15 minutes. That person could be literally drowning. Well, they're drowning to death, but they could be screaming if they weren't under a paralytic. We waterboarded people in Guantanamo. There's a reason we had to stop. It falls under cruel and unusual punishment. Yet we are having people like dying with dignity say that this falls under compassion and empathy. When you're drowning people chemically to death, dying with dignity says that this is a painless death. Well, if you take MAID orally, it takes between 30 minutes to 24 hours. 24 hours of active drowning while you're under a paralytic.